그러니까.
I know. I'm not really used to the little northeast little. So is. So you went to the dark side, then the light side, okay, rather than go to the light side?
Yeah, and go to the dark side, yeah, so it's yeah.
Uh-huh.
I think I prefer conservation, but it, actually, at the private law firm I was at, it was, we did criminal defense, we did PI,
Okay.
business,
That's
a
awesome.
lot of stuff, so
Yeah.
it feels good, but.
Yeah.
Do you have, associates with like other, or are you just?
We have, our whole firm has around 85 attorneys, and then just this office here, we have like 7 attorneys.
Okay,
So,
that's great.
yeah. Yeah, it's pretty cool. I mean, you kind of get the small firm kind of relaxed feel, but then you still have resources that differ.
Right, that's actually,
Yeah, definitely. I know I worked in Troutman before here, and I was like, God, it was like a large country club before.
Is it true the doors were shut? You do.
Oh, yeah, it is. Well, the doors were shut until one of the partners came at 7 o'clock, said, hey, I'd really like you to come to my charity event tonight.
Oh, wow.
You're like, okay, that's what my kids know, my friend's birthday party. You know?
Oh,
So it was just, it's a different, I mean, but, I mean, it was nice. It paid off a lot of loans, but it just, you know, I came in a little bit later, I probably, I had full life before I went to law school, so, it's definitely for younger people, you have to do law for a thing if you're going to go in that area.
Right.
You know, just to get that part of your career that, yeah, it wasn't for me, so it's like, well, but I didn't want to go to a small firm just because the small firm IP practice, you're really you're not dealing with large, complex issues and everything like that, and I wanted to, sort of still have the company sort of issues, but, where I could see my kids every now and then, so,
We made a good decision, that's good.
Well,
Priority, you can raise family, that's like one of the main things for a lot of people.
it's tough, it really is. They say, oh, it should never be a decision, but you're like, you got bills to pay, you want to give them, the opportunity and stuff. Because I grew up poor, my father was in the army, so we had never had any money, so I never wanted my kids to have to take their soccer shoes together, and here you go, like, okay, we're gonna have to hold off on the soccer shoes and stuff, but, we have 3.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's
once out there, I'll tell you what, with insurance, I may be going back to large law firm. Like that, we have USA.
Oh, okay.
And they said our insurance, when our daughter just gets her learner's permit, it's gonna go up $1,700 a year.
Wow.
So, and they said when you have your son, we're gonna be around 2,000. It's like, oh.
Wait for it, college.
I know, it's just like, well, we told them, we're gonna make you guys pay at least for some of your college. Like, if you don't get a scholarship, you're gonna be paying for some of your college because we want you to know how important that is to, like, nothing's gonna be handed to you in your life. And, I mean, we'll see how that goes. I mean, until they ask, hey, can we have this? Like, okay. So, you have family? I mean,
Yeah, I have family here. They're all in Gwinnett, actually.
Okay.
Immediate, but then I have a lot of extended relatives in the southeast. But yeah, it's.
So, but that's like your, it's.
Yeah, I've been in, well, actually, I'm from North Carolina. So,
Okay.
Carolinas came here. It's been
It was so funny is because I live in Cobb, and I was coming over here. I was like, this is like a whole nother state.
It is.
Really, you could go from Cobb to Cab and feel like you've moved to a whole different state.
It's really different. Because when I was in Fulton, downtown.
Oh yeah, that's completely.
It's completely, exactly. And so, it's been good.
Yeah.
Number of cases of big murders or arrests.
Oh, wow.
But it's.
And it was a great opportunity, so, have you ever thought about going, once you go through to go back, where you're gonna go into, like, or you're gonna go to the U.S. Attorney's office? I'm sure if they come calling, Is that somebody's camera right there?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, all right. Just everybody knows that there's a camera. That's being recorded.
Yes, Your Honor.
We talked about it beforehand.
Everybody? All right, please be seated. Before we get to the opening and closing remarks, any issues?
Your Honor, I just wanted to ask if we would be able to use individual copies of the evidence to hold up during closing. The current copies of the evidence are in a binder. So if opposing counsel wants to look at these to authenticate that these are the same exhibits that are in the binder, I would ask that we be able to hold them up individually.
Would you have any issues with that?
We trust defense counsel, Your Honor. We'll be doing the same with individual exhibits.
Okay, is any other matters to attend to?
Not
Okay, let's proceed with closing arguments.
Permission to set the well for use of the charge.
Granny, please proceed.
Counsel, members of the jury, may it please the court.
Yes.
I'm so sorry this happened. It was all my fault. I didn't mean to do. Those were the words of the defendant the morning after his daughter died. On July 14th, the defendant forced his daughter up the LaCroix Loop Trail. Only one of them would finish that hike. Only one of them would return to campsite 12. It was only the defendant who would write these words, admitting to what he done.
One second, counsel, before you continue. You've seen it, you can go ahead and sit down again. Thank you.
Parker was left unmoved. For these reasons, we brought the charge of involuntary manslaughter, child endangerment against the defendant. We had to prove the defendant knowingly put Parker in danger and Parker died as a result. We met this burden beyond a reasonable doubt. The facts, evidence, and testimony show the defendant left her on the loop, knowing she was likely to fall. We've proven this to you for those three key facts Mr. Thornberry introduced at the beginning of this trial. That the defendant knew his daughter was vulnerable, he knew that trail was dangerous, and he did nothing to protect her from danger. It starts with that condition. You learned about brittle bone disease. Parker had osteogenesis imperfecta. You saw this letter written by Corbin Dallas sent to the defendant that said, Parker's really sick. Stubbing her toe could be very bad. But she was going to be okay as long as she didn't have a very bad fall. The defendant knew his daughter was vulnerable. He still chose to take her on this hiking trail. 4-mile hike. 700-foot change in elevation over the course of a mile. We heard she was in no condition to make that hike. Mrs. told you she was limping around that campsite using a hiking staff just to get by. The defendant still forced her to ride. And you heard about this warning sign. The defendant testified he saw it on that trail. You'll have this when you go back to deliver, where it says, climbing this trail requires climbing on iron rocks. That people have died on the LaCroix Loop before. He knew this trail was dangerous. And the defendant even told you what he saw on the LaCroix Loop. Kelly Dewes told you this is what the whole thing looks like. 40-foot drop. Anyone can tell one wrong step could be deadly. For a little girl, with respiratory issues, cardiac problems, fatigue, the defendant knew that one wrong step was all the more likely. He knew this trail was dangerous. He did nothing to protect Parker from danger. He forced her to climb. She's limping, complaining, falling further and further behind. And then she starts screaming. The defendant snaps. He grabs Parker's hiking staff because he's tired of her being weak. And leaves. He left her on the loop, knowing she was likely to fall. The defense told you different story. Parker, she ran off in the middle of the night. But their story isn't reasonable. In that autopsy report, the 29, you'll have it, it tells you why. Because it identifies the story the defendant told is scientifically impossible. The words of Dr. Quincy, Parker died between 4 p.m. and 6 p.m. on July 14th. The defendant told you Parker left in the middle of the night. But in the middle of July, in Midland State, the sun doesn't set before 6 p.m. Now, defense counsel had that autopsy report for over a year. They had an entire year to find an expert who would take that stand and tell you that conclusion's not true. Those environmental factors, they impacted that time of death. They didn't bring an expert to the stand because they couldn't find one who would agree with their story. she wasn't the 12-year-old girl who would go on a hike by herself in the middle of the night. These words that she sent from the loop, going to die or break all my bones. The defendant told you he didn't call 911 because he didn't have cell service, no reception across the entirety of Culver's campground. The members of the jury, how did Parker Page send a message at 3:15 p.m. campsite phone? Their story is not reasonable. They expect you to believe the defendant is a loving and caring father, but instead of calling 911, instead of calling law enforcement, he increased the price on his child's life from $10,000 to $200,000. He told you he didn't call the police because the internet told him not to. The members of the jury, that's not reasonable. He submitted that life insurance increase request. He signed on the dotted line because legal documents, they don't go through when you reconnect to Wi-Fi. The document submitted, the defendant signed his name. He wanted $200,000 for his child's life. They checked that box on that napkin found in his pocket. Now, I wrote something down during my cross-examination with the defendant. I said, well, why didn't you tell the police about Parker's phone? Why didn't you tell them you knew that she'd run away, that you found her phone under that dumpster? And he said, I didn't tell them because no one asked me. I said, why didn't you tell them about this life insurance policy that you're not the beneficiary? He said, I didn't tell them because no one asked me. Members of the jury, a loving, caring father who would do anything to protect their child. When that child goes missing, when that child is found dead, a loving, caring father doesn't withhold information because no one asked for it. He told you instead of calling the police, he wrote this note. He wrote, it was all my fault. I didn't mean to do it. I was just so angry. He checked off the box for $200,000, and he checked off the box for the phone that he hid under Remy Bouchard's dumpster. He met our work. That letter proves the defendant knew that girl was vulnerable. He knew that trail was dangerous. He told you himself he sat in that cafe at 3 a.m. and did nothing to protect his dog. Find the defendant. Thank you.
May it please the court. Opposing counsel, members of the jury. Ms. Grieve just stood up here and asked you to convict Jordan Ryder for the death of his daughter. And with a request like that, with the burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt resting on her shoulders, I would expect that she would provide you with certainty. Instead, she gave you assumptions. Because what the prosecution is desperately hoping you won't notice is that in order to believe their case, you have to make one key assumption. You have to believe that there's anyone to blame here at all. And when you take away that assumption, your case falls apart. When you take away that assumption, you start to realize that the prosecution is stuck on the wrong story. They're stuck on evidence that at face value looks like it can support their case. But they're so stuck on their own version of what happened that they can't see any possibility in which Jordan Ryder could be innocent. Like, for instance, if the words, "I'm so sorry this happened, it's all my fault," aren't the words of a guilty man, but of a desperate father who wishes he could have stopped his daughter from doing something dangerous. That, of course, he was angry that she lost her phone, but now he would do anything to turn back time and tell her that it was going to be okay. Or a life insurance policy that they say is the motive for Jordan Ryder leaving his daughter on that trail, but if they looked a little closer at it, they realized that doesn't make much sense. Because Jordan Ryder told you that he wouldn't get any money from this policy. He was the policy holder, but that doesn't mean he was the beneficiary. In fact, if you look a little closer at this policy, you'll see there's no beneficiary form there at all. If the prosecution had done their due diligence, if they had gotten that beneficiary form, they would have seen exactly what Jordan Ryder testified to today. That his brother's name is on it, not his. It's not our job to find evidence for the prosecution, it's theirs. And I think Ms. Grieve was a little confused about that when she came up here and talked to you earlier. Because she told us it was our job to tell you answers that they hadn't asked the questions to. But that's actually not the case. Because the prosecution is the one with the burden of proof here. So if the detective didn't ask Jordan Ryder the right questions during that interrogation, an interrogation where Jordan Ryder didn't even know he was being accused of leaving his daughter on that trail yet, that's on them if they didn't get the answers. And they can't stand up here and interrupt Jordan Ryder on every single answer that he tries to give them just because they don't like what he has to say. They have to give you certainty, and they just haven't done that. So we have to ask ourselves, why are they so stuck on this story? Why are they so stuck on having someone to blame? Well, we've heard one from the testimony of the witnesses today. 3 different witnesses have told you how large the media presence was in this case. They told you that from the very first day of this investigation, the media was involved. Jordan Ryder told you that he was arrested on the first day of that investigation, and when they were bringing him to the station, the media were already saying that he killed his daughter. Detective Chesney told you that he had already charged Jordan Ryder with murder on that first day of his investigation. He couldn't go back on that. He couldn't say we were wrong. There's actually no one to blame here. That's why when they heard Cameron Lee's eyewitness account of what happened on July 14th, they ignored key parts of it. Because they're saying that Cameron Lee is their witness. Cameron Lee is the one who saw Jordan Ryder coming back from that trail alone after Parker Page had already died. But that's not what Cameron Lee testified to today. In fact, what Cameron Lee testified to today is that the police didn't even ask her to do an official identification of Jordan Ryder. So we have to ask ourselves why that is. Maybe it's because what she testified to today contradicts everything else that all the other witnesses and what all the testimony is telling us. For instance, she says she saw Jordan Ryder come alone at 6:30 across that bridge, but Kelly Dews, the prosecution's own witness, testified that he was on that bridge at 6:30 and he didn't see anyone there. And Mr. Rodriguez, our witness, testified that he actually saw Jordan Ryder already back at the campsite at 6:30. That doesn't provide us with certainty. That makes us wonder what else the police were missing while they were stuck on the wrong story. But let's just say that Miss Lee really did see Jordan Ryder cross that bridge at 6:30. It still wouldn't prove a thing. Because they're telling you that Parker Page died between 4 and 6 p.m., but if you look a little closer at this autopsy report, it actually says something completely different. Sure, it says 4 to 6 p.m. right here, but the detective admitted on that stand that right here in the fine print, it says that timeline can change. Now, the prosecution just got up here and said that we could have called an expert to the stand to tell you that timeline did change. Again, that's not our burden. What the prosecution could have done is they could have called the medical examiner who made this report to the stand to tell us why exactly it says that that timeline can change based on environmental factors, how certain he actually was about this autopsy report, about that time of death, but they didn't. Probably because they were afraid of what he would say. Since we don't have that testimony, we have to go based on what's written right here. And that's not certainty. That's reasonable doubt. And it makes sense that that's what's written there because Miss Lee also testified that there was someone trailing behind Jordan Ryder on the bridge that day. He wasn't actually coming across that bridge alone. There was someone else. And we know from that autopsy report that that person could have been Parker Page. They've been stuck on the wrong story for the entirety of their investigation, but the evidence is telling a different story. They said over and over that Parker was left alone on the Lechbron Loop Trail, but that's not what the evidence tells us. The evidence tells us that Parker got back to the campsite with Jordan Ryder, and then she was looking for her phone, and she couldn't find it. She said, "I left it on the trail." Jordan Ryder said, "Don't go look for it, it's going to get dark out there." Everyone testified that trail is dangerous in the dark. He said, "Don't go look for it." She said, "Okay." Fell asleep. She went off on her own in the dark. When witnesses had testified that the sun was setting at 6:30, she fell off that trail. She died. Members of the jury, Parker's death wasn't a crime, it was a tragedy. And every single day since July 14th, 2018, Jordan Ryder has not only had to live that tragedy over and over, but now he's faced with the possibility of a new one. Now, I don't know if there's a right ending to a story like Mr. Ryder's, but I know what the wrong one is, and it's the one the prosecution is asking me to write. So deliver a just verdict for Mr. Ryder, the only verdict the evidence demands. Find him not guilty. Thank you.
Prosecution, did you reserve any time for vote?
Yes, Your Honor.
I'm ready to take this.
Cameron Lee saw the defendant return to campsite 12 with that hiking staff without his dog. That's certainty, not assumption. The day that investigation began, the defendant admitted to Detective Chesney he committed a crime. That's certainty, not assumption. The defendant took that stand and he told you a story he didn't tell the police. He didn't call 911 because he didn't have reception. No, that's not true. This is certainty, not assumption. The defense is stuck on a story. One that's not reasonable. One that's not scientifically probable. It's where they thought we believed. Counsel came before you and asked, do these look like the words of a guilty man? So members of the jury, let me ask you. $200K, check. Phone, check. Looked up non-extradition spots. Check. Those are the words of a guilty man. We've proven the defendant knew his daughter was vulnerable, but he left her on that one. Find him guilty. Thank you.
Yes, did you reserve any time for rebuttal?
We don't have rebuttal for defense in this jurisdiction.
Would Your Honor like us to step outside of the room while you finish filling out your ballots?
No, you can stay in here, just please be seated. Thanks for asking that.
Yes, Your Honor.
So we'll start the second period of awkward silence. So once these are taken up by the scores, then we'll do any questions or any comments.
Yes, Your Honor.
you don't just stay here if you don't, you know.
Your Honor, we have, our timekeepers can take the
Oh, you
ballots
guys,
to
you're
tab.
ready, okay. Are you still writing? Yeah, yeah. And we're done, so it's no more Your Honor, or anything like that, so. It's good.
I just think if you want to,
Oh.
hold on to those.
I'll let my co-presiding judge, do you want to say?
Points, I think we only have like 5 minutes. I
Yeah.
don't want to cut off your lunch. Let's see. So I'll just, generally point out some things. Opening statements, I thought overall they were really good. I think from the prosecution, there was a lot more movement, jurors, you want them to focus on you. So you could be distracted if you keep moving around, I think as a juror, I think that was what distracted me. But eye contact was something that I liked in the opening statements. All the witnesses, you guys did a great job acting. The accents, they were legit. But eye contact with the jurors, that was great from all the witnesses because you want to convince the jurors, hey, I'm a credible, witness. And that was one thing. And also, I like from both sides, the prosecution and the defense, that you need to help your witnesses out. They're up there. You need to object. Something I saw that the defense did really well was when you were cross-examining the witnesses for the prosecution. Yes, is what I got. I was convinced every time. You need to object. You want to cut off their flow. That's something that you can use. Object, Your Honor. Sometimes you have to have your reasons. Object here, say object. Give a good reason. Object, because if you keep that flow going, I'm going to be jurors. They're on that. Yes. Okay. They're bringing their case in. So I really liked how, again, the objections, you guys know your evidence rules really well. Timely objections, I think a lot of you did that very, very well. Using your demonstrations giving quick responses to the objections, giving your arguments. I think everyone did a great job on that. Some of you had really clear, coherent voices when you guys were making, I think, your arguments and your questions. Again, I want to be focused on the witness, but at the same time, make your confidence. That's one of the big things for you guys, confidence. I want to know that you guys have to be confident in what what your position is. If you guys aren't confident, I don't think the jurors would believe you. But for both sides, you guys have to be confident in what's presented. I think overall, great job. It looks like you guys prepared. I really enjoyed the witnesses. You guys did a great job, as well as all the attorneys who did it. But again, I would just say overall, with being respectful to the court is one thing, but don't speak too fast. Jurors always look at how you treat other people in the courtroom, whether opposing counsel, let me say this, just as the presiding judge mentioned, make sure, you guys are respectful to others and make sure that, so I looked at that as well as a juror, but as an attorney, that's something that you guys need to do in the courtroom as well. I think that was over 5 minutes.
Holy
maybe.
crap, that was awesome. No, just literally everything she said, just real quick, a couple of little nits, and this has actually happened yesterday as well, is for some reason, just to be clear, ends up being like the phrase that's used a lot. So it is something where it's sort of synonymous with that. So just be careful about it. Also, use your natural voice when asking questions. I know that you all know what questions you're going to be asking, but several of you did a really weird kind of introduction to your voice. So just be natural, just relax and have the good flow. Also note too, there were some objections that obviously were very clear, but some I just did arbitrarily just to see what you were going to do. So, and every single one of you did fantastic. So don't ever get mad when a judge, sustains or overrules you. Probably just trying to see what you're doing. I mean, honestly, most of the stuff is, and a lot of times in your regular practice, a judge is going to do it just because they want to hear it. I mean, whatever you say, it doesn't make a difference. Don't forget your 403s, the prejudicial stuff. There was some stuff that could have been an opportunity to say, oh, this is not really probative. There was one that was brought in. I think it was like something about the hockey trail being dangerous. That was good, but just don't ever forget about that as well. Just because jurors won't know the difference, they'll think it's evidence. And last but not least is just be careful in your closing of bringing in evidence that wasn't already introduced in trial, because judges hate that, and because they know they'll end up getting it'll be part of an appeal. So just be careful, and everything. But I mean, you guys rocked it. You guys are obviously well polished, and I wish you all the best. So
thank you, everybody.
Thank you all so much. I'm not gonna say
Thank you for
yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you
Thank
have any comments for me as a whole?
Yeah, no, actually, yeah. So your case was very well brought. I think you attacked a lot. Like you did a good job attacking. You did a good job attacking, but when those witnesses come in, one thing I would do is kind of pull back on so many objections. Is once it gets like object, it is. After a while, I was like, yeah, I got it. Got it. Go forward. Stuff like that. And this is what you would do. So. But I thought your case was perfect because I think you brought in reasonable doubt very, very well. I mean, that's what you wanted to do, and I thought you brought it. If it was, if it was something that I would have believed that there was potential for reasonable doubt. So I thought your case was, yeah. But I just be careful like how you. It was very clear that you used the question you were going to ask, so it didn't look like you were listening to the witness sometimes. So just what you said, slow down. You're making me hungry from the empanadas, dude. I'm serious. I swear to God. I actually wrote that in there. Now I'm hungry. But your case was very well brought. Also, continue to research that. You also do not be afraid to explain what this not to the jury.
Great job.
People make that go up.
Thank you.
I thought you guys did excellent. Everybody did excellent. You guys did very, very well. So when you guys go to the national competitions, I think it's going to be very awesome. So, yeah, great job.
Great job. You guys did a great job.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Yes, it was definitely. Yeah. But the one thing, like with all the witnesses, and I actually wrote, I think I wrote in there, is make sure your emotions are appropriate to what you're being asked. So like, you're part of the defense witness, right? So you would feel a little bit more affinity towards that. So would not be appropriate for you to like, have a little emotion, like, why are you even questioning me like this? Kind of stuff. Don't be afraid. Don't be their witness or whatever. Like, you're the judge, the defense witness. So, yeah, great job with you. Yeah, great job with you guys. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Steve.
Yeah. Yeah, no.